You know, many people claim, me included, that Biden may be leading us into a new post-Cold War era. But the Cold War was a blinking contest between the United States and the Soviet Union over who's going to launch the first nuclear strike. Now, some officials fear that the fallout from a nuclear strike on Ukraine could be considered an attack on NATO. We're not in a post-Cold War paradise. Look at this map right here. This shows the spread of the nuclear fallout after the Chernobyl power plant meltdown in 1986. The hazardous plume of radioactivity spread across Europe. And if this happens again, that could mean NATO will enter the war. Here to continue the conversation, retired Air Force Special Ops Major Glenn Ignazio. Major, thank you so much for joining us. I just want to talk about the prospects of a potential nuclear. You know, one issue is whether or not Chernobyl is going to go, if the Russians keep bombing it, or the other major nuclear power plant in Ukraine. The other issue is President Biden is talking about, I don't know, the potential for a nuclear war. What do you think is the potential for nukes ever to be deployed in the next, I don't know, day through year one?
Yeah, great question. I mean, one of the interesting parts, if you look at history, okay, during the Cold War with the Warsaw and the Russian bloc countries, they have so many more conventional weapons than NATO and most of Europe, so that in the Cold War again, NATO said, hey, we were going to be the first ones to go to nukes. Now it's flip-flop because the expansion of NATO, now that we have more conventional than Russia, Russia's now saying, hey, we're going to go nuclear first. So that's been a tactic from history to present day. Now, if anything would happen, it'd probably be something like a tactical nuclear weapon. And again, that's a big what if, because the reason is Ukraine is sort of a breadbasket. That's where a lot of, fertile farmland is. And if they're used, that's gone. It's radioactive and it's done. And then again, as you showed in that prior map, depending on the winds, that radioactive fallout could head east or west back to Russia or to Europe. So I hope that we never get there, and I hope it's a threat. That's it.
Yeah, that could be, again, at the fallout from a nuclear power plant going up, or whether Russia was dumb enough to fire off a nuclear weapon. We heard the foreign minister of Russia today say that if NATO were to attack, because of, for whatever reason, could be even unprovoked or provoked, if NATO were to attack, that they absolutely should consider using nuclear weapons. That's a scary prospect.
It sure is. And again, if you look at this, Russia's having such a problem in Ukraine, and Ukraine forces are doing great, holding them at bay. Now, Ukraine is considered a very small country compared to the rest of NATO. If he's having that much problem with his forces in Ukraine, imagine the amount of force that exists in NATO. That's pretty daunting. So to have him sort of do this madman theory and threaten nuclear war, I can understand that. Again, it's an intimidating and a deterrence factor. But again, if you look at it from conventional battlefield, if he's having this much problem in Ukraine, you think of all the forces amassed in NATO, he'd be definitely waking the bear.
Let's take a look at the map one more time. Give us the eastern flank, the NATO eastern flank map, if you don't mind. Let's throw that up. Major, tell us a little bit about what's going on there. I know we're fortifying. I think Biden today said he's going to add additional. We have 100,000 troops in the European countries there in NATO, and we're going to continue to add. Tell us about that eastern flank, how important that is.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, as you know, the articles in the NATO doctrine state that if one country's attacked, we will all respond. And I believe this is the best thing to do as far as trying to have a great front against Russia is by bolstering the forces along that line. You're showing an incredible amount of force to also contain Russia's activities in Ukraine so that he would not expand it. So the idea of pushing all those forces forward with NATO, again, that's a very intimidating factor to have all those troops, equipment, tanks, fighters, and everything sitting on the doorstep if he was to ever cross that line. So that's what's key for the NATO buildup.
Major, really appreciate your time. A lot of breaking news. Thank you so much. Major Glenn Ignazio, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.